I'm going to place my hand underneath her head and just let it rest there. And then I'm going to just place my hand on top. So my hands are basically covering many of the sutures of the cranial bones, so I can get a feel for what's happening in the cranial system. This is something that I do in, of course, my cranial work, but it's a nice thing that I thought I would bring up here, even though we're doing massage. So what I'm feeling for is I'm feeling for the rhythm of the different bones and how they're working with each other, or if they're out of rhythm with each other. You know, we're taught that they fuse together, and either that was just a sick joke to lie, or they never really examined the skull, but the cranial bones do move. They do. They don't grow together. The cranial bones, they're free to move with each other. They slide on the membrane. They expand and contract as the cerebral spinal fluid fills and empties through the through the dural tube. So there's a lot of movement that goes on in the head, and this is called vault hold, where you just get a feel for what's happening in the cranial system. It helps to relax it down. There's other vault holds that you can do. Another one is you're just expanding over all the bones and feeling what's happening. There's a horizontal feel to it, and there's a vertical feel to it. There's a lot more to cranial sacral therapy than people really know or understand. And I don't think it's something that people can acquire unless they practice it and actually feel what goes on, because it's something that you really can't teach. You have to teach the proper technique, but it's up to the person if they're going to master cranial work or be real effective with the work. It really requires a lot of practice and thoughtfulness towards what's happening inside the body, because right now I'm feeling quite a bit of movement going on with her cranial bones. So that's just a way to start, and then you can just start by going around and just working the muscles and finding that I'm getting some pretty good results. The other parts that I'm exploring now is moving more into the advanced cranial work, which is the emotional work, which is beginning to get more and more people interested in clearing themselves at a much deeper level. It sometimes seems like things are so crazy anymore that if we don't take care of our inner peace and tranquility and knowledge and understanding, we're going to fall into all kinds of emotional stories in our head and lose touch with reality, and in some senses just kind of lose touch with ourselves. So I just loosened up her neck a little bit, checked the range of motion, and now I'm just going under to feel the muscles on either side of the vertebrae. You just kind of let your fingers go in there, and when the muscle is invited as far as it's going to, just make little circles around and see if you feel anything that maybe is out of alignment, or something that's maybe stressed, pulled in on a little bit, a little restricted, anything like that. And then you can go out the trapezius area. You're going along the levator muscle as well. So it's the same kind of just rocking and pressing, but not pressing so hard that you're creating pain, but just pressing hard enough to get a feel for where the muscle is, what the muscle tension is, what needs to be worked. Sometimes you can pick up where it's drawing to on another part of the body. And then, of course, any kind of skin stretching type work is influencing the lymphatic work to a degree, which is something else that I have been incorporating into the work when I work cranial sacral therapy. This is more of a protocol that I would do without any kind of massage therapy. I just work really different now. I don't actually, well, I have protocols that I follow because it's like playing an instrument and knowing that there's a scale and there's different kind of rules of the different keys and notes and tones, and some sound together good and some not so good. It's the same kind of thing here. Always go back to the basics, check that out, and then you build from that basic work. If you don't have the basics down real well in anything that you're doing, then you're going to have a hard time mastering it. So I like to think of that as working towards excellence in anything that you do, in everything that you do, even if it's sweeping the floor. It just puts a different perspective on things. It moves us out of an emotional space of having to do, instead of seeing it more as a mastery for what we're doing, feeling good about doing a good job. But that road is a lot harder. It takes some time. Okay, so we're stretching. I've just been going around feeling the muscles, and I'm going to check the range of motion again. Now, oftentimes people want to help you with their head turning, or they'll stop it when they think it's going to go too far. And it's real hard sometimes for people to let go. That's considered to be what I call unconscious stress patterns, where you just get you just have a pattern of, I'm going to stiffen up at this degree because it's going to hurt or whatever. Just a stress pattern. Things like that you can watch for in yourself, and also if you're doing this kind of work. So I've been doing a little bit of lymphatic work here on the neck. And then I'll just work a little bit. Sometimes you don't need a lot of oil on the face because people use different creams and lotions. So if you have a good viscosity, there's no need to add anything to it. If feels like you're kind of ripping the skin off, then I would strongly suggest to add a little bit of oil on your fingers and let it go from there. Now when you come to the side, I'm just going to say to lighten up right here where the sphenoid bone is, or the temples, it's called the temples as well, because sometimes it's real uncomfortable going across there, and sometimes people that are prone to headaches, it's just not a pleasant feeling. So to go lighter over that particular bone, I think is just a good idea. I know when I'm getting worked and somebody pushes in on that bone, I have to really bite my tongue because it's not pleasant for me at all. And I also understand it from a cranial point of view, and I don't really appreciate restricting that bone down like that for however short a time and kind of pushing it around. So just a little thing there. I did a little bit of massage on the forehead, and now I'm coming down and draining the lymph nodes under the chin. Sometimes I don't really have any kind of pattern. I'm just following what I'm feeling the body do. That actually happens more and more with repeat people. I'm more inclined to following closer to a protocol with new people than when people keep coming back to me. Then there's a whole nother kind of a set of work, the way that it works. Okay, now what I'm doing here is I have my fingers on the nasal bones and giving it kind of an upward, forward hook movement when I meld into the bone. My hands look like they're sitting hard on the head, but they're not. They're barely touching the rest of the head because the frontal bone may want to move a little bit. And I'm just gently making that little hook of a pull, which helps to open up some of the nasal passage It corrects a few of the cranial bones. It just gives some space. It's opening up the orbit a little bit. And it just feels good. I feel a lot of movement in the frontal bone, and oftentimes I can feel it in the parietal and even the sphenoid just by pulling on those nasal bones. So when I'm working like this, I can be giving several different modalities a chance to bring something forward for the person on the table. Okay, so we're going to do more lymph work on the face. I've come to feel very strongly that moving lymph on the face is healthier than pulling muscle, massaging muscle, although sometimes it's nice to get the muscle at the attachment points in the jaw or around the cheekbones, things like that. But I think that the movement of the fluid has a lot more benefit in the long run, which is why I prefer doing lymph on the face. And then down the neck, you have to remember to drain, if you're doing any lymph work, to drain it down here at the clavicular node. Okay, so we can open up the lungs. This is a lymphatic technique just to open the lungs. But then we can also get into a little bit of muscle work along here. Now I've found that there's a lot of little joints here, the sternoclavicular, the sternocranium, and other little movements of the clavicle that oftentimes really affects shoulder mobility. And there's ways to open those up and to work those bones and to work those joints, but I'm not going to go into it now. It's more of an advanced kind of a technique, and it takes hands that are a little more familiar with what is going on with the body inside. You have to be able to feel from one point to the other, and the unwinding sensation of the 2 points, and be able to also work the 2 ends as they're unwinding, to be able to follow that and work it together so that you can follow that unwinding and get that bone to move to a new place, a new alignment pattern. So I put a little bit of oil just on her chest here. This is the pectoral muscle, and there's a platysma muscle that comes along it. It's a very thin muscle, comes down through. But this is just nice to let go of some of these. It's worked similar to the back, because these muscles get kind of neglected. And then also grabbing into that pec the same way that we grabbed in. But you want to be careful that it doesn't tickle. Again, you'll startle people sometimes if you go into it too quickly. And just letting this muscle just stretch from the clavicle down and going along the sternum a little bit between each rib. And just work it down a ways, and up you go. And then same thing on the other side. So this is a little massage work. Just push, push, push. And right along the bone, again, being thorough. Come into there. Okay. Here's the muscle right here, the sternocleidomastoid. You can kind of see it coming up like this. You can also very gently, now this is a real tender spot. People sometimes don't like their necks messed with. So, but if you get underneath with the pads of your fingers, you can kind of lift that muscle up and get underneath it. And then you can just work this muscle just a little bit. You have to really know what you're feeling for here, because there's a lot of structures in that neck. It's a real sacred area. It's a very vulnerable area as well. And then there's also something else you can do, especially if your fingers are getting a little more know where the organs are, is you can also get into the thyroid and just check mobility of the thyroid a little bit. And just be careful not to push too hard on the sternocleidomastoid. It connects down into this area here, to these joints, so that's very helpful to get the front of the neck relaxed as well as the back of the neck. And then you can check range of motion again, and I like checking range of motion, giving a little bit of a stretch as you do that, pulling and pulling, stretch to the side. And you can tell how far it's going to go. If you go slow, and when you run your fingers up the side that's up, that side of the vertebrae, you'll feel if there's tension, or you'll feel if it's loosened up a little bit. You'll definitely be able to tell. And side to side, just be very, very gentle. And then another move is to hold the fingers behind the neck, and as you lift the head up, you're going to kind of push the neck up and give it a wave as the head, so you're kind of holding it. It's kind of hard, so you're holding the back of the neck and then letting it drop and then kind of waving it down. And that's a real nice feeling. And then feel that up and back pull. Let's do a cranial base release. And just, I have some people that I really like their work, but they don't do this cranial sacral release. And I only have a couple people I go to. And I'll tell you what, that's like missing the frosting on the cake. I kind of feel like I'm never quite done because I don't get that cranial sacral release, or the OCB release. Okay, and then you can just have your hand underneath, right at the base of the skull, with two fingers, one on each side of the vertebrae. Get the head nice and balanced. And then, as we do in the postural work, just lift their head if you're doing this on a friend. But very gently, you're melding it again, and it's not that you're pulling the bones, but you're pulling the tissue upward, and then letting the head feel like it's dropping back. So it's an up and back feeling. It's very subtle, very little, but it's enough to give a little bit of a stretch in that area, opening up the vertebrae. Okay. You can do the ears a little bit. And one more thing, you can do the scalp. You can kind of, be like a really good shampoo person. It's better to get down and move the skin. There's a little thin muscle around the head. And move that instead of just kind of ruffling up the hair follicles. So get down into that. But again, don't push too hard, because you don't want to make it uncomfortable with their head. So you just want to get in where you're melding with that, with the muscle and the thin layer of muscle and skin, and then wiggle it around. And it's a little bit of pressure, but it's not too bad. Just be careful of how much push you're doing. Be very, very sensitive to that. try to pay attention and be mindful of that, because that makes a difference between having somebody relax down deeply or somebody that's kind of on alert, not so sure that something's going to happen. And a lot of that can be unconscious. Okay, there's the head and neck. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing. And I think there's a little bell up there that you can hit that you'll get a notification every time we post. So if you want to, you can hit that too. But thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it.